So nice to see you all. My name is Scott Craig. I work at the Green Climate Fund on our communications team. I'll be emceeing the events over the next couple of days, so you'll be seeing a lot of me. So apologies for that in advance, but I think we'll have an interesting and illuminating time together here discussing all of the issues on the agenda. We'll go through the agenda and the sessions and the outline of how things will work in a little bit. But without further ado, I would like to invite to the stage our first speaker to open the proceedings, Mr. Yannick Glamark, the Executive Director of GCF. Yannick, please take the stage and over to you.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening for those joining us online, depending on your geographic location. And good morning for all of those attending this 2022 GPIC in person in Songdo, Korea, the host country of the Green Climate Fund. It's for me an immense honor to have a chance to welcome you to this conference. We are holding GPIC this year back to back with our global programming conference so that we can have both high-level policy makers from the public sector with high-level private decision makers to discuss together. And I will maybe make a very short presentation about the GCF strategy to catalyze private sector investment to address climate change and highlight why it's so important to have in the same room high-level representative from both the public and the private sector. So over the past 2.6 million years, what is called the ice ages, the average global temperature have oscillated from -6 degrees Celsius during an ice age to +2 degrees Celsius maximum during an interglacial, -6 +2, -6 +2. That means that during this past 2.6 million years, that has seen the emergence of our species, Homo sapiens, and all its antecessors, we have never crossed 2 degrees Celsius. In addition, during the past 12,000 years, that have seen the emergence of agriculture, we have never crossed 1.5 degrees Celsius. And so it's not too surprising that in 2015, the world decided to ensure that we will not cross the 2 degrees Celsius threshold and do our utmost to remain under 1.5 degrees Celsius. They are not frivolous numbers. They are very important threshold. Where do we stand? This is much more for reference, not to read, but basically we are the increase in average global temperature is happening far faster than what we were expecting. We have not been able to reduce our greenhouse gas emission as fast as we wanted. In 2015, when we approved the Paris Agreement, the likelihood that we will cross the 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold within the next, for at least 1 year, within the next 5 years was 0%. Today, the likelihood that we will have at least 1 year that will exceed the 1.5 degrees Celsius is 50%. And we might cross definitely the 1.5 degrees Celsius early in the next decade. For the 2 degrees Celsius, this could be somewhere between 2045, 2060. So we are speaking something that was almost a mathematical assumption a few decades ago, and which is becoming a material risk. Not only is the increase in average global temperature happening faster than what we expected, but also the impact of climate change are materializing faster than expected. In 2001, the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, thought that we will have to wait for an increase in average global temperature of 4 degrees Celsius, 4 to 6 degrees Celsius, before some entire ecosystems could be wiped out. Today, we fear that the coral reef ecosystem, for example, could be wiped out, almost entirely wiped out, 90% by the time we reach 2 degrees Celsius. And all the successive report of the IPCCs have shown that the reason for concerns are to materialize far faster than what we had planned. And now we could have a sudden shift in the entire climate system that could happen at 3 degrees Celsius. So things such as disruption, a slowdown, disruption of the thermohaline circulation, which was really an assumption only 2 or 3 decades ago. It's something, these circulations that redistribute the heat from the equator to the poles, it's something that now could become a material risk. Now, given this level of risk, you know, when you change the physical geography of the world, you change also the human geography of the world. Given this level of physical risk that could wipe out all our supply chain, for example, you imagine the issues that we have our global supply chain, multiply it by an order of magnitude. Given this level of physical risk, given this level of transition risk, with our transition to a net zero climate resilient economy for those who do not embark on this transition, given the amount of liability risk for those who do not embark on this transition, and given the amount of investment opportunities in an energy transition in terms of renewable energy, energy efficiency, in a transition of the built environment, in terms of new climate resilient infrastructure, in the transition of our food system, in the transition of the way we manage natural resources from an exploitative mining approach to a sustainable approach. Given this amount of opportunities, estimated by IFC to $30 trillion by 2030 in some emerging economies, what would we expect? Huge risk on one hand, huge opportunity on the other hand for those who move fast, who move first. We would expect the money to be shifting extremely fast from high carbon, climate vulnerable investment to low carbon, climate compatible assets. And it's not happening. Here you have basically, we are now around $600 billion a year of investment in low carbon, zero carbon, climate compatible assets. And it's maybe a tenth of what we will need to see by 2050. And if you look at this graph, we are basically progressing at a very, very slow pace. At that speed, we are definitely not to make it. The climate is not to wait for us to wake up. So why? How can we reconcile this climate finance paradox? It seems that markets are not delivering what we are supposed to deliver, which is to go from a very poor risk-reward profile to a high risk-reward, to a good risk-reward profile. One of the reasons is because of perception of risk, actual and perceived risk. Any kind of novel technologies, any kind of novel practices, novel business model, novel financing instruments entails some inherent risk. If it's new, you have risk. You have risk that you will not be able to commission your project on time, on scope, on budget. These risks are magnified when you're speaking about illiquid assets such as infrastructure. And so adopting a new approach for example, new type of zero carbon climate resilient infrastructure entails quite a lot of risk. And if you are not convinced or not aware about the climate risk, you will only focus on the risk of novelty, not on the risk of the status quo and the past. And when investors think about risk, for them, the higher they perceive the risk, the higher the reward they want, the higher the cost of money. And because green technologies basically have a lot of upfront costs, high capex, for low operation and maintenance costs, low OPEX, the cost of money is paramount. Where the difference between a bankable and a not bankable project is basically often the cost of financing. And so how to address this situation? First, we have to recognize that the world is not homogeneous. In OECD countries, the way you will have to address these issues in low financing cost environment will not be the same as low financing cost environment. Every single risk that I've mentioned will be magnified when we're speaking about the developing countries, because most of the money right now is in the north, and the investors are parochial. You invest in the geographies. We invest in the geographies we know, we invest in the thematic we know, and the less we know, the less familiar we are, the higher the level of risk. And we see dramatic difference in the cost of capital across the world. So a project on, let's say, for offshore wind power, that might be a great project in UK. The same project, same technology, same engineer. You move it to a country that does not access to capital at the cost of 5%, but at the cost of 15%, this project is not bankable. And we need, therefore, to really differentiate the approach that we are taking between low financing cost environment and high financing cost environment. In a low financing cost environment, it's very much repricing assets. It's very much making sure that we green the financial system, that we enable all investors to factor climate risk into their investment decision making. And that's the reason why we have so many initiatives right now in terms of carbon risk disclosure, etc. So it's very much about basically changing the way we appraise project and making sure that we move from a business as usual, where we see the green line, grid investment as actually riskier, and because the cost of money is a bit higher, have a lesser return, to the second slide, where actually green investment is a much more profitable investment, because there is a huge range of risk you do not have to worry about. In high financing cost environment, often the case of all the most of the non-Annex 1 countries, it's not only about climate risk disclosure. We need also to lower the cost of financing, and often by de-risking the investment, so with blended finance. And during this conference, we will be speaking a lot about de-risking. We will be speaking a lot about different forms of blended finance, about how to make blended finance works better for emerging technologies in emerging markets. Right now, blended finance works well for mature technologies in mature markets. And so that will be definitely a key topic of our discussion. And what kind of tools do we have to de-risk the project, and therefore lower the returns than financier wants for the project? Because it's less risky, my reward is lower. And because my reward is lower, my project is bankable. So that will be a key topic of our discussion over the next 2 days. And I look very much forward to your insight and active contribution. Now, GCF, the mandate of GCF is to foster a paradigm shift toward low emission, climate resilient development pathways in developing countries. Is basically to make sure that we support initiatives that change the entire equilibrium. That's either we have been successful and you see it, or we have not been successful and you do not see it. It's real transformative projects that change the entire system, and you do not need to have a consultant to tell you whether or not you have been successful. So in our private sector strategy that was approved by our board in April, we describe the 4-pronged approach that we are adopting in order to reprice assets and create new green assets, or in order to transform market and create green markets. And the first prong is about planning, new transformational planning. The second prong is about accelerating innovation in non-Annex 1 countries. The third prong is about de-risking the first new climate solution to ensure that we can deploy them at commercial scale, and we create a commercial track record that will enable after a widespread adoption by the financing system. And the fourth prong is very much greening the financing system, enabling the financing system to basically appraise and finance this new type of climate initiatives. I will take an example for each of these prongs to make it a little bit less theoretical. The creating an enabling policy environment. I think if I had gotten a penny every time I read that sentence or heard that sentence, creating a conducive environment, creating an enabling environment, I would be a rich person. Because we've been speaking a lot about it, but it's important to recognize that it's something which is actually extremely complex to do. For only climate change, there are at least 4,000 environmental policy instruments that a government could use in order to create a conducive environment to attract investment, to scale up climate action. And in this slide, I've proposed a taxonomy of what could be, what are these instruments. So some work on the demand side, creating a demand for green products. Some work on the supply side, removing the barrier for investors to come with the first project. Now, if you get this instrument right, you can actually catalyze a lot of money at very, very low cost to the taxpayer or to the investor. If you get this investment wrong, you have a huge cost for the taxpayer, a huge cost for the investor, and you can end up with a huge social and political capital cost. And so GCF has a dedicated program, the Readiness Program, to $1 million in grant a year to governments to enable them to basically decide themselves what does it mean for them, an enabling environment, enabling policy and institutional environment, and what kind of instruments they want to put in place. The second prong is catalyzing innovations. The days where when we were speaking about technology, we were speaking about technology transfer from the north to the south are over. A lot of the critical solution that we need to address climate change in the south are not needed in the north. So the north will not invest in the R&D to create them. These innovations will have to be developed in non-Annex 1 countries. And one of the key issues is that if you are an innovator in non-Annex 1 countries, you cannot rely on the incubators and accelerators that you will have in the Annex 1 countries. You cannot rely on the early growth financing instruments that you will have. And so the second prong of GCF is to support the development of climate incubators and facilitators to help innovators to refine their business model. And we are developing a number of specialty early growth instruments. So, for example, one instrument is called CRAFT. It's a $400 million private equity fund. We provided $100 million of first loss equity. We are the first to lose our money if something goes wrong. And this is in order to support innovators who want to come with new climate adaptation technologies, new climate adaptation solution. Now, we have an innovator who has come up with a new climate solution. How do we move it to commercial scale? And that's where often we use the terms of de-risking. We look at the project and we look at what kind of instruments can be used to improve the risk-reward profile. And not to multiply the discussion of different type of instrument, I'm sticking to private equity, but GCF can use any kind of grant, non-grant instrument. We are totally flexible. We are completely unique in being flexible in terms of our financing. We are partner agnostic. We work with more than 200 partners, and we are capital agnostic. We can use any kind of grant, non-grant instruments. And there, for example, one of our concerns was that the bulk of climate investment will have to take place at the subnational level, but it's very difficult for the subnational level to be able to access money. And we developed another private equity fund, this one of $750 million. We provided $150 million of first loss equity for investing in climate adaptation and mitigation infrastructure at the subnational level. And we hope here again to demonstrate that actually investing in the subnational level is something that is a legitimate investment. Similarly, we have our board has also approved $500 million private equity fund for coral reef. When we started telling people that we wanted to have to support an investment projects for coral reef protection, remember 2 degrees Celsius, we might be wiped out. The people were very skeptical. Can you imagine coral reef protection? So first, we clarified that we were speaking about investment that can be potentially very attractive, ecotourism, sustainable aquaculture, sustainable mariculture, productive use of algae forests. That second, we will partner with a number of philanthropy and official financial contributors to have a lot of grant money for ensuring a deal flow, a lot of project preparatory fund in grant, to have a very high deal flow. And third, once again, we provided $125 million of first loss equity. Now, if the project fell, fine, we lose our money. If a project succeeds, we get back our money as an investor for the Green Climate Fund, and we can reinvest it somewhere else. But much more importantly, we will have demonstrated that investing in coral reef is a legitimate investment. We will have created a new asset class. This means that when you and I, we go to see our bankers, you could say, I want 5% of my saving to be invested in coral reef protection. And as you know, for those who come from the private sector, once you have repriced an asset class or created a new asset class, you move money at scale, at very, very large scale. And that's the type of scale we need to reach. Now, it's important that your banker is aware that there is such a thing as a new asset class at the subnational level, or new asset class for coral reef. And so we are also investing a lot in greening the finance. Different from green finance. Greening finance, I mean, it's working with the domestic financial institution, enabling them to basically integrate climate risk into their project investment appraisal methodologies. From time to time, we can establish a green bank, a dedicated team of people who basically do only that, working on climate project, or we can create a climate facility within an existing bank. And so that is one first component. And the second one is often to enable them to finance this project. And therefore, to enable them, for example, to access domestic, regional, sub-regional, regional, or international capital markets by helping them to design green bonds and provide credit enhancement to these green bonds. And for example, one of our initiative, in October, we will be submitting to our board for approval a project to establish a green guarantee company that will be provided guarantees to corporation and subnational governments in order for them to be able to access capital markets and complement the ongoing work in terms of sovereign debt. GCF in a nutshell, for those who are new to our organization, we have now become the world's largest climate fund. We very much operate as actually an impact investor. And so if you want to figure out where we stand compared to organizations that you might be more familiar with, have a look simply at this graph. In closure, I would like to mention once again what I said at the beginning. GCF is a partnership organization. We are not a new bank. We are not a new technical agency. We are a fund whose purpose is to help you to invest in climate initiatives. And we work through for our partners. And therefore, I'm immensely grateful to all of you for having joined us for 2022 GPIC. And I hope that's at the end of the day, and we will have created some new partnerships. Thank you very much for your attention.
Many thanks, Yannick, for those remarks and for setting the stage for today. And I would like to now invite to the stage Mr. Soji Omisori. He's the Deputy Director of Green Climate Fund's Private Sector Facility. Soji, welcome to the stage, and the floor is yours.
Good morning. My name is Soji Omisori, and I'm Deputy Director for PSF. Welcome to Korea, welcome to GCF, and welcome to GPIC 2020. This is the fifth GPIC and the first in 3 years. The theme is very much about unlocking capital for climate action. So over the next 2 days, we'll be spending a lot of time talking about de-risking projects, catalyzing and mobilizing funding, green financial institutions, both local as well as regional, promoting innovations and investment platforms, and of course, the need for a paradigm shift in order to enable us to achieve scale, because collectively that's what we are here to do. Part of the objective of GPIC is to enable us to gain new insights, as well as better understand the size of the climate opportunity and challenge as it relates to adaptation and mitigation. However, all of these speak to what I call the what question. And I'd like us to focus on the how. By doing this, if we distill the themes, at the core are what I call 3 basic principles of connections, collaborations, and partnerships. Ultimately, that is what GPIC is really about. For us to connect, for us to collaborate, and for us to establish partnerships. GCF cannot address the climate change by itself. Respectfully, you yourselves as individual companies, entities, are not able to do the same. However, together, including those here, those online, as well as future partners, we collectively can help to address this climate challenge that we all face. So it's this partnership spirit that I would like us to focus on and embrace, that together we are able to leverage and convene our collective strengths, resources, and ambitions to drive our collective action, climate action goals. I would now like to close by presenting or playing a short video that summarizes this partnership focus that I'd like us to focus on. Thank you. Hope you have a successful GPIC, and I'll now hand over to my colleague, Scott, who will introduce the formal session. Thank you.